Do you understand how important the words rules of origin and transshipped are to the global economy? If not, let's find out. Hello and welcome to another KuLAB. My name is Ku. This is our laboratory for learning. Thanks for joining us for another business news breakdown. If you like this kind of content, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us out. Today, I wanted to take a look at an article that had some of the vocabulary that we're going to be seeing over the next few years in it. Words like rules of origin, transshipped, understanding words that have to do with tariffs, how companies are going to navigate those tariffs, and basically some of the vocabulary that you're going to be seeing in business news for the next 3 years. So let's go ahead and get started with our next KuLAB. As always, I like to give credit to the author or authors. So today we're going to be taking a look at an article from Reshma Kapadia. Okay, let's take a look at that headline. Tariffs aren't hitting earnings yet. Why that might not last. So this headline is a general headline to talk about tariffs and how companies aren't yet seeing the price increase. They're not hitting the earnings yet. Companies are not having to pay for them yet. But that might not last. But I think the most important thing about this article today is some of the sections talking about what companies are doing to make sure that tariffs are not so hard on the companies. That the companies can still be profitable, the companies can still make money. So let's take a look at a few of those things that companies are doing. Companies are going after low-hanging fruit to reduce their cost and tariff exposure, deducting international freight charges, making sure they aren't paying duties on warranty costs embedded in price for goods, and reducing unit price by thinking through how design work and royalty payments are incorporated. Okay, so let's break some of this down here. Let's start with the phrase low-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit is an English phrase, an English idiom that describes some of the easier things to do. Right? If you picture a tree, a fruit tree, the easy things to get are the ones that are hanging really low. You can reach up and grab them. But the fruit at the very top of the tree is difficult to get. So it requires more difficult strategies. So low-hanging fruit are the easy things you can do. Now the low-hanging fruit is to reduce costs. So these are the things that they can reduce their cost to help make sure that their prices don't go up. They're also reducing cost and tariff exposure. So we understand what tariffs are, but the word exposure means when you're not covered by something. It's a word that describes risk. So when we talk about exposure, it means things that companies have that are risky. The word itself means to sort of be outside, to not have cover. So things that they don't have a plan for. Anything that could cause a business problems is its exposure. So some of the things that they are doing, the low-hanging fruit, to reduce that exposure are things like finding places to reduce shipping costs. Making sure they aren't paying duties on warranty costs embedded in price for goods. Sometimes companies who have a warranty for a product like cars, computers, things like that have a warranty, sometimes they include that in the price so the customers will pay that. You might get something like, oh, includes a free warranty. Well, that price has already been included in the price of the product. But these companies don't want to pay tax on that warranty price. So they may be changing their pricing structures so that the price of the good is lower and they don't pay tax on that warranty. You might start seeing products not have a warranty, or you might have to pay extra for that warranty since the company doesn't want to include it in the price of the goods because the total price of the product will be taxed. Finally, reducing unit price by thinking through how design work and royalty payments are incorporated. So this is just basically, how do we make the product? Who do we have to pay for the product? So these are all low-hanging fruits, easy things that we can do. So now let's talk about some things that are a little bit more difficult. What are the harder things to do? International trade lawyers are spending a lot of time analyzing rules of origin, requirements that dictate what % of a product has to be made or significantly transformed in a country to qualify for its tariff rate. That is pushing some companies to redesign products or substitute suppliers for certain inputs. Okay, here's one of our key words that we're going to be seeing in business news in the next 3 or 4 years. This idea of rules of origin. So let's break this down a little bit. So rules of origin are criteria used to determine the national source of a product. Where does that product come from? And because different countries have different tariffs, where that product comes from is incredibly important. If it comes from a place like Vietnam that has 40% tariffs, it could be a lot different if it comes from South Korea, which has about a 20% tariff. So that's 20% of cost to a product depending on which country is its origin. So when we talk about rule of origin, we also have to talk about this word transformed. In the United States, who are issuing a lot of these tariffs, there is something called substantial transformation. Substantial transformation means there is a product, and in that place it went through some sort of significant change. And because it went through a significant change, either in materials, it was built somewhere, manufactured somewhere, then that new place can be considered its origin. So for example, let's stick with smartphones. If I get some raw materials from China, right, and I ship those raw materials to Singapore or South Korea, and those raw materials are turned into transistors, they're turned into the parts of the smartphone. They're no longer rocks or minerals. They have been transformed in a meaningful way. The place of origin is now South Korea or Singapore. I can say, oh, this product originated in that new country because it was substantially transformed or underwent substantial transformation. So this is important because how much a product changes in a new location really affects the rules of origin. Another vocabulary word we want to learn with this is the word value added. Value added basically means to add some sort of value to the product. It seems simple, but there's a lot of lawyers, a lot of people involved to talk about how much value is added. If I build an entire smartphone in one country and I ship it to another country and that country puts it in a box, did they add a lot of value to that product? Is that new country the rules of origin? Is that the origin of the product? Probably not. So there are lots of restrictions about what counts as value added, what counts as transforming a product to make sure that it can be considered from that country. This idea of rules of origin is pretty significant in terms of what we're going to be hearing about. There's going to be lots of argument about this because different countries have different tariffs, significantly higher in some cases. So it's going to be very important where is the origin of the product and how much they will have to pay in tariffs. But even here, companies aren't being overly aggressive, in part because rules of origin are expected to be a major point of debate in the upcoming review of the US-Mexico-Canada Trade Pact. and is also a detail that needs more fleshing out in trade pacts the U.S. has announced with countries in Southeast Asia, including Vietnam. The preliminary deal with Vietnam, for example, imposed a higher tariff of 40% on any goods deemed transshipped, with scant details on how the administration defines that term. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these vocabulary words. It's also a detail that needs fleshing out. So the phrase fleshing out means to add more details or find out more details. It's an idiom or an expression that just means, okay, I need more information. We want to flesh out the details, be more specific in our information. The preliminary deal, preliminary means first or beginning deal. So preliminary is a word that describes something that is like a first draft. In this first deal with Vietnam, there was a higher tariff on any goods deemed as transshipped. So transshipped is our next really, really important vocabulary word. Transshipped is the idea that sometimes you ship a product to a location that has a lower tariff rate so that you can avoid tariffs. In our example that we mentioned earlier, if I have smartphones and the origin of that smartphone, the country, has a 40% tariff, I might ship these products to another country, let them sit there for a little while, and then say, oh, these products come from this country. This country only has a 20% tariff, so I pay 20% less. The problem, though, is that international supply chains often go through many countries. It usually doesn't come from the country of origin directly to the United States or Great Britain or Australia. These supply chains go all around the world before ending up in their destination. So places like America want to say the rules of origin do not change just because something is transshipped. Just because it went to a different country doesn't mean that new country is the place of origin. The problem, though, is scant details on how the administration defines that term. So in this case, we're talking about the United States administration, the Trump administration. The word scant means very little. There are very few details associated with what the Trump administration considers transshipped. Like I mentioned before, international supply chains. Supply chain is the chain of events that links the resources to the final product. And this idea of transshipped is maybe a way to get around the point of origin. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us. I hope you found that article informative. There's a lot of vocabulary in there that we're going to see for the next few years in regards to tariffs. So I thought it was kind of an important article, important vocabulary to take a look at. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us out. Be sure to add a comment below. Remember, this is the KuLAB, so if you have any questions about it, or if you have a suggestion for an article that you would like me to break down, leave that in the comments below. And of course, I'll see you in the next KuLAB.